as a 19-year-old in his third NHL game, how will he handle the playoffs? And how will that kid line of Minton, Hussein, and Higgins, how will they perform? Can they be an X factor?
You're listening to the PuckUps podcast. It's time to hit the ice with Brian DeFelice.
Welcome into episode 30 of the PuckUps podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, and thank you all for joining me. The Stanley Cup Playoffs are finally upon us, and so on today's show, we're going to preview and predict the Boston Bruins opening round matchup against the Buffalo Sabres, as well as the other 7 matchups around the NHL. Before we do that, however, if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and subscribe to the PuckUps on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you get your podcast. And to get in touch with me or be a part of the show, you can email me, info@thepuckups.com. You can tweet at me on X at BrianDFelice_. You can tweet at the show at the PuckUps, or leave a comment on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, anywhere the show has a social media account and post content. Marco. Buffalo Sabres fans are none too pleased right now with Boston Bruins head coach Marco Sturm. And that's because while the Bruins and Sabres don't officially begin until Sunday evening in Buffalo, in certain ways, the games have already begun. And by that, I mean the game between the ears. Now, to be fair to Sabres fans, playoff hockey brings out the emotional side in fans, and rightfully so. Not just the on-ice product, not just what happens between the boards, but what happens after the games and in the locker rooms and at the podium. It's all part of what makes playoff hockey so special and playoff sports in general, right? And so for a Buffalo Sabres fan base that has been unfortunately deprived of playoff hockey for a decade and a half, a fan base that did not deserve that absence. No fan base deserves that absence, but Buffalo fans in particular. Buffalo is a great sports city, and it's certainly a great hockey city. Despite their lack of Sabres success in the last decade plus, Buffalo has continued to lead the U.S. in national hockey TV ratings. Mutual games. The city of Buffalo always watches hockey, regardless of who's playing. And so certainly when they're back in the postseason for the first time since 2011, they're going to be clinging to every word that their coach says, that their players say, but also what the opposing players say and what the opposing coach says. Everyone knows there's a contrasting style between the Boston Bruins and the Buffalo Sabres. Styles make fights, and that is why playoff hockey is so fascinating, because you can have two teams that play similar and they try to strategize against each other for 7 games. Other times you have teams that play opposite styles, and which team can implement their game more so on their opposition, which style is better suited for the playoffs. And I think that's what we're talking about with the Bruins and the Sabres. One team is predicated on speed in Buffalo, and another team is predicated on physicality, opportunistic scoring, and defense and goaltending in Boston. And I think ultimately that is what was at the crux of Marco Sturm's comments that we'll get to in short order here. The Bruins know they have to play a certain style against Buffalo. They have to try to impede what makes Buffalo such a good team. Marco knows it. You know who else knows it? Is Lindy Ruff, the Buffalo Sabres head coach. Lindy Ruff was speaking to Buffalo media, I want to say on Thursday, and he was asked about the Bruins and the problems that they present as an opposition, and he was asked about the job Marco Sturm has done with that Bruins team, and Lindy said as much. He said they play a physical style of hockey. They work really hard. They clog the neutral zone. And he went on to say that Marco Sturm knew the style of play that this Bruins roster had to implement this year to be successful, and that the players bought in. And Lindy Ruff went on to say that Marco was right, and that Lindy would do the exact same thing, essentially, if he was in Marco's position coaching the Boston Bruins. So it's no secret how the Bruins want to play. But Marco made specific comments today that got Buffalo fans a little bit up in arms and annoyed and frustrated, and maybe rightfully so. I mean, there has been a stereotype about the Sabres over the last 10 plus years where they're a softer team, a skill and finesse team at times that doesn't really emphasize defense and goaltending. And that obviously hasn't been the case this year with Buffalo. And so I think certain Sabres fans might be a little bit defensive of what their team has been this year versus what it's been in the past. But let's waste no further time. Let's go right to Marco Sturm's comments and hear what he had to say that got Sabres fans so annoyed.
Buffalo obviously gets the last change the first two games. Is that a huge deal, or is that something that we kind of overblow as reporters?
We'll see. We'll see. In the past, Lindy was not really a big matchup guy. He did his thing, so we'll see where it goes. Maybe he does it different in the playoffs, but we don't really care. We don't really care. We know how I have to play. We're going to be ready to go. We're excited. We are bigger, stronger. We are more physical. We just have to be smart, but we're going to go after them. And whoever comes in first line, second, I don't really care. We try to play our game and not their game.
Okay, so basically the comments that Marco made that got people all bent out of shape was him deeming that the Bruins are bigger and more physical than Buffalo. And the reaction online, because one of my co-hosts for WEEI's Escape podcast, Bridget Prue, she had a video from Marco's scrum and she posted it on Twitter and it just went viral. And it's mainly Buffalo media and Buffalo fans who caught wind of those quotes, and they're taking Marco's comments literal, and they're mentioning that the Sabres are, they have XYZ guys that are 6'5" and bigger and blah blah blah, and citing the fact that they had games against Tampa this year where they were very physical and they battled hard and there were a lot of fights, and they're trying to let the world know that, hey, these Buffalo Sabres are not small and they're not soft. And I think there's merit to that. I don't think Marco is trying to insinuate that Buffalo was small and soft. I just think that it's kind of accurate when not that part, but the Bruins being physical and being a bigger team. Generally speaking, they're one of the heaviest teams in the league. They're one of the biggest teams in the league. And I think they've compiled some of the most hits in the league. They are one of the heaviest penalized teams in the league. It's less to say what Buffalo isn't and more to say what Boston is. Boston knows that they can't really win on skill alone, especially against Buffalo. So they have to kind of muck it up. They have to grind and be physical and hard on the forecheck. And I think that ultimately is what Marco was trying to get across. And I understand Sabres fans and Sabre media hearing those comments and saying, we don't shy away from physicality and we're not small. But again, I don't think it was meant to be any sort of dramatic commentary from Marco Sturm there. I think even Sabres fans would understand that Buffalo is a more skilled team than Boston, and they have more speed than Boston. So if the Bruins are going to win this series, they're going to have to rely on wearing down Buffalo and forechecking hard and checking well and clogging the neutral zone and having good goaltending and defense, right? So it's really no secret that's Boston's MO. It's how, listen, the Bruins got to the playoffs for a reason, right? They certainly had some really solid depth scoring. They had some good success in their power play, and they have a couple of, certainly one superstar in David Pastrnak that had 100 points this year. And they had a great year from Charlie McAvoy and a good year from Swayman and Korpisalo, but mainly Swayman. So the Bruins they're not a goon roster. Like they're not just out there, not executing highly at offense. And so the Bruins have their strengths outside of being physical, but against Buffalo, they are not the more skilled team top to bottom, and they're not the fastest team. So it's no secret how Boston's going to have success in this series. So with that said, let's start to break down the Bruins and the Sabres. And basically, here are some keys to me for success for the Boston Bruins if they want to beat Buffalo, and maybe some X factors. Jeremy Swayman. To me, he's a key and an X factor. To me, Jeremy Swayman has to be one of, if not the best players in this series for Boston to have success against the Sabres. So if Jeremy Swayman can be what he's capable of being, what we saw him do against Toronto in 2024, and honestly, even Florida that year, the Bruins lost that series, but it wasn't because of a lack of goaltending. So can Jeremy Swayman step up to the moment? Can the Bruins top line, can they be consistent? Because they really haven't all year. And they've been split up at different times. Now, on an individual basis, David Pastrnak had a great year, right? 29 goals, 71 assists for 100 points, his fourth consecutive 100-point season. So David's been excellent. He's the best player in this series. Certainly the best forward, but the best player overall. Morgan Geekie, 39 goals. A great year for Geekie as an individual. But as a trio, Pastrnak, Geekie, and Elias Lindholm, which is going to be a line to start the playoffs, they're a net negative line this year in terms of goals for per 60 versus goals against per 60 delta. So, you know, if they click, if they can for the first time all year be a net positive line, then okay, right? That's great. But the Bruins, that trio is not, it's a big question mark for me. It's a big question mark for me heading into this series. And I have 82 games to tell you why. Not that they were together for all 82 games, but over an 82 game sample, they were split up many times because they weren't getting a job done. And when they were together, they weren't getting a job done consistently enough. They're capable, I think. I know Pastrnak and Geekie are capable. I think Elias Lindholm, we'll see if he can get to another gear in the postseason. There are certain guys out there that are playoff performers and more so than regular season performers. Maybe Elias Lindholm will be better suited in playoff hockey. I don't know. I'm not banking on it, but that's a big question to me. Because if they aren't clicking right away and they're getting outpossessed and outgenerated and outscored, well, Marco Sturm's not going to be able to keep them together for the whole series, and he'll have to change something. So that's a big question mark for me heading into the series. Discipline. Discipline's another big one for me. The Boston Bruins are the second most penalized team in the NHL this year, and their penalty kill is 24th in the league. When you consider how fast Buffalo is, how fast they play, how well their defensemen move the puck, especially their top four defensemen, Buffalo plays a quick game. Okay, so not exactly the type of opponent that's going to help Hampus Lindholm mitigate his holding penalties and his stick infractions, right? Like, they're a team that if you aren't matching them, you're going to chase them. And when you're chasing the game, you're getting tired, you're getting lazy. When you're tired and when you're lazy, you start to reach and tug and pull. So I just feel like if the Bruins can find a way to stay disciplined in this series and to eliminate as many stick fouls and holding penalties as possible. Obviously, there's going to be penalties both ways. It's the nature of the sport. It's how it goes. But can they not go on a parade to the penalty box? Because when you do, you're going to make your penalty kill that much more vulnerable, because they're going to be going out penalty after penalty after penalty. They'll get tired. Your PKers will get tired. The Bruins penalty kill unit this year obviously has not been great. As I said, they're 24th in the league. And what's worse is that the more you spend time on the penalty kill, you're icing out your top players and you're taking away 5-on-5 ice time from your team, 5-on-5 rhythm. You're taking away the possibility of drawing penalties of your own. You're putting fatigue on your goaltender. So if the Bruins discipline, which has been better since the Olympic break ended, if the Bruins discipline can be there in this series, then there's a window there for them. Now, here's an X factor. James Higgins, Fraser Minton, and Murat Husnudinov. Those three players, their average age is 21. They've played together for 2 games, and we all know what a great year Minton had. I think most people appreciate what Husnudinov brings. He brings tenacity, he brings energy, he brings responsibility, and he brings a little bit of creativity and skill as well. But when you compare and contrast the lineups, the Sabres have more and better depth scoring than the Bruins this year. The Bruins have pretty good depth scoring up and down their lineup for the most part over 82 games, but Buffalo's was even better, right? I want to say Buffalo had 7 forwards with 40 or more points. Peyton Krebs had 39 points in 82 games, so he was 1 point shy of making that list 8. And Josh Norris had 34 points in, I want to say 44 games or something like that. But if he played a whole season, he would have probably had somewhere around 60 points. So there is more depth scoring for Buffalo in their top 9 than Boston had this year. The Bruins conversely had 5 forwards with 40 or more points. And then it was Minton and Husnudinov with, I want to say 35 and 31 or 32. Now the Bruins' fourth line, all the Bruins' fourth liners had over 20 points this year, which is great. But if we're talking 40 plus points, which is like top 9 production, Buffalo's top 9 produced more consistently than the Bruins' top 9. With that said, James Higgins wasn't around all year until game 81. So not to put undue pressure on a 19-year-old, but I'm just going to say, what if James Higgins clicks offensively and him and Minton and Husnudinov become a real third-line scoring threat? That's an X factor. I don't know that that's going to happen, but if it does, it kind of changes things. How does James Higgins impact the Boston Bruins power play? They didn't have a power play opportunity in either of his 2 games since being on the team. But I imagine he'll be on the second unit to start. Can he help the Boston Bruins power play that's kind of been struggling since the Olympic break? So these are all questions. These are all X factors that if they all go in the Bruins' favor, then I think the Bruins have a pretty good chance of winning the series. That said, Buffalo won the division, and they are a damn good team themselves, and I really think that their speed and skill is going to create problems for Boston. So we'll see. We'll see who gets to their game more. I definitely think that over the course of a 7-game series, if the Bruins can wear down Buffalo, if Nikita Zadorov, if Mark Kastelik, if Tanner Jeannot, if Jonathan Aspero, if guys on Boston with that play with a heaviness, if they can wear down Buffalo's defense, if they can wear down their forwards, then over 7 games, that will take its toll. It will take its toll. But I'm here to say that Buffalo they're not going to lie down, which kind of brings us back to that conversation we were having about the Sabres fans and the media being upset with Marco Sturm's comments, because Buffalo's not a team. The Bruins might be a more physically assertive team, but Buffalo's not a team that's afraid of it, and they certainly can play that style as well. They went out at the trade deadline. They added Luke Shen. They added Logan Stanley. They brought in Sam Carrick, who actually is going to be out for this series. So that's a blow for Buffalo's fourth line, because he can bring a similar element to Buffalo's lineup that Mark Kastelik and Tanner Jeannot bring to Boston's. But Buffalo has, they have some spunk in their lineup. They do. Peyton Krebs, Zach Benson, those are 2 undersized skill forwards that they're absolute pests. And, Bruins fans, if you aren't really aware of them, you will be pretty soon. So even their smaller guys, they can get feisty. But Rasmus Dahlin, Tage Thompson, Alex Tuck, Jordan Greenway, these guys, Josh Stone, Josh Norris, like these guys there, they have some spunk to them. Jason Zucker, they can play. They can play. So it's going to be a really entertaining series. I think it's going to be a long series. Let's just rattle off some numbers real quick here for these two teams before we give a prediction on who wins this series. Goal differential. Well, first off, head-to-head. The Bruins were 3-1 against the Sabres this year. So they played 4 times. Boston won 3 meetings. Now, 2 of those came earlier on in the year. Buffalo hadn't really found their stride. I also think they had some injury issues during one of those games. I don't think Dahlin played in one of them. But I don't really put a ton of stock into head-to-heads over the course of a regular season because there's all sorts of factors. Sometimes teams are traveling on a back-to-back. Sometimes teams are in a funk. Sometimes teams just, they haven't hit their stride. So it's different when you're strategizing for somebody over 7 games than when you're just coming into town for a night on a Wednesday night in February. But for what it's worth, the Bruins, they were 3-1 against Buffalo this year. Okay. Over 82 games, goal differential. Boston plus 22, 11th in the NHL. Buffalo plus 47, 5th in the NHL. Okay, so I think that speaks to how Buffalo has committed defensively this year. They're not the Buffalo Sabres of last year. Lindy Ruff has come in, he's done a great job. He's probably the favorite to win a Jack Adams this year. So probably him and maybe Dan Muse from Pittsburgh. I think Marco Sturm should be in the conversation, but Buffalo, they are a well-rounded team. They're fast, they check well with their feet, and that's no joke. I mean, plus 47 versus plus 22. That's no joke. Now, Boston's 11th in the league with plus 22. That's not bad. That's good. But it just goes to show Buffalo being 5th in the league at plus 47, they've had a great year. Shots on goal per game. Boston 27, which is 21st in the NHL. Buffalo 28.1, which is 13th. Okay, so Buffalo, they do generate a little bit more shots per game than Boston. And they prevent more shots against per game because shots against per game, Boston gives up 29.7 shots per game, which is 5th most in the NHL, whereas Buffalo gives up 29.1, which is 10th most. So both teams give up chances. Which kind of speaks to why if the Bruins can physically wear Buffalo down over 7 games, then maybe Buffalo starts to give up more opportunities than they did in the regular season. Special teams, Boston on the power play, 23.4%. That's 9th in the NHL. Buffalo, 19.5%. That's 21st in the NHL. Now, Boston was a top 5 power play unit all year, heading until the last month, and they dropped. They were a bottom 5 power play the last month of the season. So can they get back to what they were? If they can, then there should be a relatively sizable advantage in the power play for Boston. But at the same time, Buffalo has a ton of skill. I mean, they can roll out Rasmus Dahlin, Tage Thompson on the top unit, and others. Like, man. So Boston's percentage on the year was better than Buffalo's, but I think Buffalo, on paper, they could definitely match Boston's power play. On the penalty kill, this is a big advantage for Buffalo. Buffalo's 4th in the league, 81.9% on the kill. Boston, 24th in the NHL, 77% on the kill. When you consider the fact that Boston also is the 2nd highest penalized team with 978 penalty minutes, that's not a good marriage when you're the 2nd most penalized team and you have a bottom 10 penalty kill. Conversely, Buffalo, they take the 7th most penalties in the league, but they have the 4th best PK. So when you talk about Buffalo's PK being better, but Boston's power play being better, maybe you can call the special teams a bit of a wash. But again, when you look at how often Boston goes to the box, combined with Buffalo's speed, I have to see it to believe it in terms of Boston having the advantage in the special teams category because their discipline has to be improved. So this is a long-winded way of me saying, listen, I think this is a coin flip. I think honestly 6 or 7 of the 8 opening round matchups are possibly coin flips. There's only one that there's 2 that I'm fairly confident of the result. But that just goes to speak to the parity. So this Bruins-Sabres series is no different. I think it's an absolute coin flip. We had to do an episode. I've been going back and forth. I had to do an episode for the Skate Pod this morning, and both of my co-hosts chose Boston in 7. And I don't know, maybe I was feeling like a bit of a homer, and I didn't want the show to come across as a bunch of homers if all three of us chose Boston, because I went third. And I could already see, of course, a Boston podcast, all three hosts pick Boston. I mean, truly, it is kind of a pick 'em, so it's not that crazy. There's a world where both teams win. There's a world where I can see both teams winning. I think I have more questions about Boston right now than I do Buffalo. My questions for Buffalo are, can they withstand the physicality that Boston will play with? I know Sabres fans didn't like the comment from Marco Sturm, but it is true. Like, going into the corners against Nikita Zadorov for 7 games, if you're Peyton Krebs or Zach Benson, is not going to be fun. Like, it's not going to be fun. Tanner Jeannot, Mark Kaslick, those guys are going to be wrecking balls on the forecheck, especially with it being the playoffs. I know Buffalo has their guns too. I know Buffalo can play that way too. But can Buffalo withstand the physicality of playoff hockey? Because it's been a long time since, to be fair, there are players on Buffalo that have been to the Cup Finals. Alex Tuch went to the Finals with Vegas. Bowen Byram won a Cup with Colorado. Who was it? With Ryan McLeod went to the Finals with Edmonton. So even though the Sabres as an organization have been in the playoffs in over a decade, there are some players with good playoff experience in Buffalo. But generally speaking, their top players, Rasmus Dahlin, Tage Thompson, those guys have not played in the postseason. Their goaltender, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, has not played in the postseason. When you look at Boston's top players, Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak, Jeremy Swayman, they have played in the postseason. And McAvoy and Pastrnak a lot. So I think the Bruins' top players mentally understand the ups and downs of playoff hockey and not to get too high or too low. I think the Sabres' top players are yet to experience that. Now, maybe they'll be naturals. Maybe experience doesn't matter. But my big 2 questions for Buffalo is, can they get to their game over 7 games when it's tighter checking and more physical? And can they overcome their lack of experience / having pressure on them being the favorites? Because their home crowd is going to be going crazy, and they're going to be salivating for a lot of goals and for a lot of success. And if Buffalo comes out slow and they get down a couple of goals to Boston, will they start to grab their sticks tighter, right? Will they start to feel the pressure of the restlessness of a home crowd that's expecting better? So these are little things. These are some questions I have for Buffalo. I'm not saying that they're going to happen, but these are questions I have heading into the series. Questions I have for Boston, I mentioned earlier. Can they be disciplined? Can Jeremy Swayman be the best goalie in the series? I'm expecting him to be, but can he be? Will he be? Will the Bruins' top line of Elias Lindholm, Morgan Geekie, and David Pastrnak, will they finally find their stride and be a net positive line? We'll see. It's a question. I'm not questioning David's abilities as an individual or Morgan's goal scoring ability now, but those 3 as a line, they've been a net negative line all year. Will they all of a sudden become net positive? We'll find out. And what will James Hagens look like? His 3rd game in the NHL, and it's going to be in the playoffs in Buffalo. How does his game elevate? Can his game elevate? Obviously, James is a big part of Boston's future, but right now, as a 19-year-old in his third NHL game, how will he handle the playoffs? And how will that kid line of Minton, Husadinov, and Higgins, how will they perform? Can they be an X factor? So all of these questions for me are unanswered in terms of Boston. And there's just more questions with Boston right now for me than I have for Buffalo. So I really am seesawing between these two teams because I absolutely can see a world where the Bruins win, and I can see a world where the Sabres win. I know I said Buffalo on a podcast this morning, but I reserve the right to change my mind. And I think I'm going to go Boston in 7. I said Buffalo in 7 this morning. I'm going to flip here. I'm going to flip-flop here. And one of the reasons I said Buffalo in 7 this morning is because the Bruins haven't been a great road team this year. So are they going to go into Buffalo on the road and win Game 7? I think I'm going to pick Boston in 7 here. And if I'm wrong, at least I'm wrong with my heart, right? So I'll happily be wrong with this one. But I think it goes either way. It's definitely going to go 6 or 7, probably 7. Moving along, let's go to Montreal and Tampa Bay. Now, this series, again, you talk about styles making fights. Same exact thing as the Bruins and the Sabres. Different teams, different varying degrees, but Montreal, they have some grit with a guy like Josh Anderson, Brendan Gallagher if he's playing, Arbor Jackeye. They have some guys with some grit, but basically Montreal is all skill and finesse, and they're younger, they're smaller at certain positions. Nick Suzuki's not the biggest guy. Cole Caulfield, not the biggest guy. Lane Hudson, not the biggest guy. So when you compare that to Tampa Bay, I just think that you're talking about a young skill team in Montreal that's going up against a bigger veteran team in Tampa Bay. There are a couple of notable injuries right now, one for Tampa and one for Montreal. Or Tampa is not an injury, it's an absence though. Victor Hedman has been gone for a personal leave of absence for quite some time, and to my knowledge, he's not going to be in the lineup for Tampa Bay. So that's a big loss for Tampa in this series against Montreal. Montreal right now is without Noah Dobson. So I don't know if Dobson's out for a while or if he's day-to-day, but those are two key guys on the respective back ends. I think the Hedman loss is bigger for Tampa. So by the numbers here, Montreal plus 27 goal differential on the year. That's 9th in the NHL. Tampa Bay plus 59, 2nd in the NHL. Shots per game, Montreal 26.3, which is 24th. Kind of surprising. That did surprise me a bit because they are such a highly skilled team that they only generate the 24th most shots in the NHL this year. Tampa Bay, they generate 28.1 shots per game. That's 14th in the NHL. So Tampa Bay generates more than Montreal does. And Tampa Bay also prevents more per game than Montreal. Tampa Bay gives up 26.7 shots per game, which is 25th in the NHL. And Montreal gives up 27.8 shots per game, which is 15th. So it's 25th fewest for Tampa Bay. On the power play, Montreal, 23.1%. They're 10th in the league. Tampa Bay is 20.7. That's 17th in the NHL. That's shockingly low for Tampa Bay. When you have Nikita Kucherov and you're 17th in the NHL, Darren Raddysh has had a great year for Tampa Bay too on the back end. So that is a bit surprising to me, especially with Kucherov and Gensel and Hagel. And on the penalty kill, though, Tampa Bay has the far better PK. They're third, clicking at 82.6% kill rate. Montreal, 78.2%, which is 18th in the NHL. And then Tampa Bay is the most penalized team. So when it comes to the Bruins, they say, hold my beer. Tampa Bay is the most penalized team in the NHL with over 1,200 penalty minutes. But as I said, they have the third best PK. So that's the big difference between the Bruins and the Lightning is both teams are heavily penalized, but Tampa Bay has one of the best PKs in the league. Boston has, among the bottom third. So at the end of the day, I see this one going either direction. I ultimately question Cole Caulfield had 50 goals this year. He's a small, undersized forward. Will he be the same scoring threat in a 7-game series against a bigger, experienced Tampa Bay team with Andre Vasilevsky in net over 7 games? Can Lane Hudson do what he does in the regular season when Tampa Bay is game planning for him and strategizing for him and being physical on him? So I personally like Montreal's forward group 1 through 12 better. I think Tampa Bay has the better top 6, and they have the best player in the series, and Nikita Kucherov. I can see Montreal winning this series, but ultimately, I think they have the nod in goaltending, and I think they have the best player in the series, and I do think that their size and their experience, to me, I have to give them the nod. And if Montreal wins, it won't surprise me, but I will, out of respect to Tampa Bay and what they've done and what they've accomplished, I'll give them the nod here. And simply put, from Montreal, I need to see it to believe it. I have to see it from them. So I could pick them, but I'd be probably just kind of banking on their youth and speed and skill. It's a different game in the postseason. They very well could win the series. They very well could. I think Victor Hedman's a big loss for Tampa Bay. And I don't love Tampa Bay's bottom 6. I really don't. But there's more to it than that. And Tampa Bay deserves the benefit of the doubt right now in my mind. So I'll go Tampa Bay in 7. Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, 2 teams that have the same amount of points. So the Battle of Pennsylvania is back at it, alive and well, and I can't wait for the series either. Philadelphia has some good young players. They have Porter Martone, who they just brought in from Michigan State. He's their 6th overall pick from last year's draft. They have Michkov, who's a younger winger that is, he's trying to find his game. You have Trevor Zegras. You have Jamie Drysdale on the back end, Cam York. You have Travis Konechny. You have Owen Tippett. Sean Couturier is a good veteran leader. There are some other guys, Tyson Forrester. So I like a lot that Philly has to offer. And you kind of compare that to Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh's kind of in some ways, with some players, they're the opposite, right? They have the Sidney Crosby. They have the Chris Letang, the Erik Karlsson, the Evgeny Malkin, Ricard Raquel. They have guys that have been there and done that. Brian Rust, right? So they have a lot of experience on their side. They do have some young guys too, like Ben Kindle. I like Chinikov. Chinikov they got from Columbus. So, Pittsburgh has some youth too, but they're obviously more cut from the veteran cloth than Philadelphia is. So both teams finished with 98 points, but a lot of the underlying numbers to me favor Pittsburgh. For example, goal differential, Pittsburgh plus 25, Philly plus 7. Shots per game, Pittsburgh 28.6, 10th in the NHL. Philly 25.5, 28th in the NHL. So Philly doesn't generate that much. Shots against per game, Philadelphia 25.5. That's 29th fewest. So Philadelphia doesn't generate a ton, but they also don't give up a ton. So hats off to them there. Pittsburgh 27.4, which is 21st fewest. So not as good as Philly, but still they're one of the top. They're one of the best 10, 11 teams in the league at eliminating chances. Special teams is where Pittsburgh really runs away with the analytics here. Philadelphia is dead last on the power play in the NHL at 15.7%. Pittsburgh is 7th, clicking at 24.1%. So Pittsburgh with the clear advances on the power play. Again, Philly has talent on their power play, and I think the addition of Porter Martone net front helps them a lot. Trevor Zegras can zip it around. right? Travis Konecny is a good player. So Philly has talent, but over 82 games, the numbers, you are what the numbers say you are. I will just notate here that Porter Martone not being there all year, had he been there all year as a net front guy, maybe they're not 32nd, maybe they're 25th, right? But still, Pittsburgh with the decisive edge in the power play. And on the penalty kill, Philadelphia 22nd in the league, 77.6%. And Pittsburgh is 6th at 81.4. So Pittsburgh has 2 top 10 special teams units. Good for them, right? So ultimately, I just think that Pittsburgh is going to find a way around the margins to get the win here. I think they have more experience. They're a better team analytically, and they have home ice advantage for what that's worth. So I think it's going to be a good series. I'm going to go Pittsburgh in 6. And then for our final Eastern Conference playoff series prediction and preview, we're going to go to Ottawa versus Carolina. Now, this is a series. You have Carolina, who is first place in the Eastern Conference. They're first place in the Metro Division, so they draw Ottawa as wild card 2. 113 points in the year for Carolina, 99 for Ottawa. Bit of a discrepancy there, but I'll tell you, the numbers would tell you that these two teams, in a lot of ways, they're closer than that would make you think. So let's start with goal differential. Ottawa, plus 32, 7th in the NHL. Carolina, plus 56, that's 3rd. Okay. So Ottawa's top 10. So is Carolina, but Carolina's top 3. So advantage Carolina there. Shots per game, Carolina is 2nd in the league. Ottawa's 9th. So once again, Ottawa's sitting there saying, hey, we're a top 10 team in the league statistically. But then Carolina's saying, yeah, we're top 3. See ya. Shots against per game. Again, here's Ottawa allowing 24.4 shots per game. That's 30th fewest in the NHL out of 32 teams. You want to wager a guess who number 32 is? It's Carolina. They give up the fewest shots per game at 23.9. So every metric I've said so far, Ottawa's been a top 10 team. Obviously, the shots against, the lower you're ranked, the better you are, right? So it's not saying that Carolina is the 32nd worst. It's saying that they give up the 32nd fewest. So that's a good thing. On the power play, Ottawa, 8th power play in the league. Carolina, 4th. So Ottawa can't win for losing when it comes to these metrics. They're a top 10 team in every metric so far, but so is Carolina, and Carolina is just that much better than them. On the penalty kill is where Carolina really has an advantage here. Ottawa has the 29th penalty kill in the league. Carolina has the 11th best. So the numbers here would tell you that Carolina, is just slightly better than Ottawa throughout the course of the regular season. And then on the penalty kill, they're much better. And then as far as discipline goes, they're also more disciplined. They are the 26th fewest penalized team, the Hurricanes are, and Ottawa is the 8th most penalized team. So Carolina's more disciplined. Their special teams are that much better. And then at 5-on-5, they're both similar, but Carolina's just a little bit better. Now, I think the X factor here is also goaltending, because Carolina's goaltending has been Jekyll and Hyde this year. Ottawa's goaltending has been Jekyll and Hyde. And, it's been a story off the ice too with Linus Ullmark's mental health. So I like both of these teams. I mean, obviously, like I said last episode, I think Carolina is kind of boring. They don't have a lot of superstars. They're not a fun brand of hockey necessarily, but you have to respect what they do, and they have a lot of good players. I think that Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, Seth Jarvis, Logan Stankoven, Nikolai Ehlers, Jordan Stahl's a good veteran center iceman up the middle in their middle six. Taylor Hall can still play. Jordan Martinhook can play pretty well. So Carolina, they're not the sexiest team up front, but they have guys that can contribute. And on the back end, they have Jacob Slavin leads them defensively. I think Jacob Slavin and Gustav Forsling for Florida, I would say, are the two best defensive defensemen in the NHL. I mean, flip a coin who you want to say is first. But he has a good supporting cast. They have the young Russian on the back end. Is it Nikishin? I might be saying his last name wrong, but he's a good young defenseman, strong kid. You have Keandre Miller back there. Shane Goss is fair. Chatfield. They have Chatfield too. So yeah, they have a good blue line. But the Senators, I like the Senators team a lot too. Tim Stutzla, Brady Tkachuk, Drake Batherson, Claude Giroux, Dylan Cousins. I like Dylan Cousins a lot. They have. There's others too, and then on the back end you have Jake Sanderson, Thomas Chabot, Jordan Spence. There's a lot to like for both these teams. I feel like Ottawa might win this series, but I'm just gonna go off of. I know how Carolina constantly plays. They're a very consistent team, whereas Ottawa can be a little Jekyll and Hyde at times. And I'll say home ice plays a factor here. I'll go Carolina in 7. So those are my 4 picks in the Eastern Conference. I got Boston. Ask me tomorrow who I have. I might say Buffalo again. Right now I have Boston, Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, and Carolina in the East. And then moving along to the Western Conference, we have Colorado versus the LA Kings. Now, Colorado is far and away the best team in the NHL this year, 121 points. The Kings, they kind of limped into the postseason with 90 points. And it's also worth noting that Los Angeles is without Kevin Fiala and Andrei Kuzmenko to start the playoffs. Certainly, I think they're both out for a longer duration of time. So those injuries hurt LA if they wanted any chance of upsetting Colorado, which I just quite frankly think is not going to come close to happening. This to me is a series where it kind of, if there's going to be a sweep in the opening round, it's going to be this one. But I will give the Kings credit because they do have some guys that have been there and there's a lot of pride in that room. And they do have some good players. So maybe they sneak a game out of this series. But again, look at the goal differential here, plus 99 for Colorado. That's first in the NHL. LA minus 22. Okay, so that's clearly a no-brainer there. Colorado just they're good at pretty much everything except for one category, which very much surprises me. But shots per game, they're first in the NHL. LA is 17th. Shots against per game, Colorado gives up the 28th fewest. LA's okay, 22nd fewest. Power play percentage, Avalanche are the 27th power play in the NHL. That shocks me. 27 out of 32. When you have Nathan McKinnon and Marty Natchez and Cale Makar, just to start with, I don't know how you could possibly be the 17th power play or 27th power play in the league, but they are. The Kings have the 28th power play in the league with 17% success rate. Penalty kill, Colorado, first penalty kill in the league, clicking at 84.6%, and they are the least penalized team. So they have the discipline and the penalty kill to go along with it. Meanwhile, the Kings have one of the worst penalty kills in the league, 30th overall, 74.6%. So if Colorado's power play is going to have success, it's going to be against one of the worst power plays, penalty kills in the league. So I'm going to go Avs in 5 here. I'm not going to overthink it. I kind of wanted to say a sweep, but I have too much respect for these NHL teams that I'm probably never going to predict a clean sweep. So I'll go Avs in 5. Next we have Vegas versus Utah. This one's interesting to me, but I'm going to go Vegas in 7. I think both teams are pretty close in a lot of areas. No William Karlsson for Vegas, and no Barrett Hayden or Jack McBain for Utah, at least to start. But Vegas, plus 15 goal differential, that's 13th in the NHL. Utah, plus 28, that's 8th. Shots per game, Vegas is 8th in the NHL. Utah's 20th. Shots against per game, Vegas is 31st, so they give up the 31st fewest shots per game. Utah's pretty close behind them at 27th. So both teams mitigate chances against. The special teams here is a bit of a difference, though. You have Vegas with the 6th best power play and the 7th best penalty kill. Utah has the 18th best power play and the 19th best penalty kill. So the clear edge in special teams to Vegas. And Vegas is also the second least penalized team in the NHL. So when you talk about the home ice advantage that Vegas has, and you talk about their experience and their high-end skill, even though Utah has a lot of skill themselves too, but when you talk about experience, high-end skill, home ice advantage, and special teams, I'm going to go Vegas in 7 here. So I have Colorado and Vegas in the West so far. Let's go over to Edmonton versus Anaheim. Edmonton was second in the Pacific, Anaheim third in the Pacific, 93 points for Edmonton, 92 for Anaheim. And, this one comes down to me, Anaheim's a really good young team. I think they're really promising, but I just don't think you beat Connor McDavid in the first round. I will say there's reasons why Anaheim could win, and it starts in goal. Lucas Dostal is far and away better than Tristan Jarry, and Edmonton, just for the life of them, can never figure out their goaltending. But ultimately, Anaheim's numbers aren't that impressive. They are a minus 15 on the year goal differential. That's 19th in the NHL. Edmonton, middle of the pack, just a little bit better, plus 13, so that's 14th in the league. Shots per game, Edmonton's 4th in the NHL. Anaheim's 3rd. So Anaheim does generate slightly more shots per game than Edmonton. Shots against per game, Edmonton gives up 26.7, Anaheim 28.4. So Edmonton does give up less per game than Anaheim. On the power play here, we start to see some big differences here. Edmonton has the top power play in the NHL, clicking at 30.6%, which makes sense when you have Evan Bouchard, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl out there, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Anaheim is 23rd on the power play. Penalty kill, both teams are kind of meh. I mean, Edmonton 20th in the league, Anaheim 27th. So at the end of the day, I have Edmonton in 6. I just think that their star power is going to be, too much for Anaheim to handle. Although I think Anaheim has a lot of young core pieces that are going to be a problem for a long time. When we're talking about Leo Carlson and Cutter Gauthier, Beckett Seneke is a great young player. Troy Terry, Mason McTavish, Jackson Lacombe on the back end. They brought in John Carlson at the trade deadline from Washington. Radko Gudas is not going to be a fun guy to play against for 7 games. So, they brought in Chris Kreider. They have Jacob Trouba. There's Alex Killorn. There's a lot of experience over there in Anaheim. And I could see Edmonton bowing out in the first round if Tristan Jarry is just an absolute ATM machine and bank that's always open. But I'm going to go with the top player in the world and Connor McDavid getting through for the first round of the playoffs. And then we'll finish things off here with Dallas versus Minnesota. And to me, boy, you have 2 teams that could go to the Stanley Cup final if they weren't playing each other in the first round, right? I mean, obviously they'd have to meet in the conference finals in that situation or somewhere later on along the line, but both of these teams are capable of going on a run. And I think that right now I look at these 2 teams and Dallas is just a little bit banged up right now. If both teams were completely healthy, I think I might go Dallas. Right now, I'm inclined to go Minnesota because Dallas has no Tyler Seguin, who, isn't a top line player at this point in his career, but he's still a good middle 6 guy. I believe they're going to be without Miro Heiskanen to start the series. I think he's day to day, but he might play game 1. So maybe he plays, but right now he's listed as day to day. And then Rupe Hintz is out to start the series. So Minnesota can get a jump on Dallas because they're a bit banged up right now. But both these 2 teams, wildly impressive. Obviously, Minnesota hit another gear when they brought in Quinn Hughes from Vancouver. And they got a ton of skill over there, a ton of speed and skill. I love their blue line with Quinn Hughes and Brock Faber and, Jonas Brodin and Jacob Middleton, Jared Spurgeon. Like I love Minnesota's back end. And up front, they have a ton of speed and skill too. And you have Kirill Kaprizov, one of the best swingers in the game. You have Matt Boldy, an emerging star, and he really bursted onto the scene in 4 nations and certainly the Olympics. Matt Zuccarello is a great player, been around for a long time. Joel Eriksson Ek is a good player. They have some talent over there. Ryan Hartman. Yeah, it's gonna be a close, hard fought series. Goal differential: Dallas 4th in the NHL plus 53, Minnesota 6th at plus 32. Shots per game. This is interesting. Dallas is 30th in the NHL in shots per game, 25.3. That's shocking. That is shocking when you consider how much talent that Dallas has. Minnesota 7th in the NHL, shots per game. Shots against per game, Dallas 26th, fewest. Minnesota 9th. So Minnesota does give up their chances, their fair share. On the power play, Dallas is 2nd, Minnesota's 3rd. On the penalty kill, Dallas is 13th, Minnesota 16th. So both of these teams are pretty good. They're pretty close. They're both very formidable opponents. I talked about the players that Dallas might be without, but the players that they are with, you have Mikko Rantanen, Wyatt Johnston, Matt Duchene. Jamie Benn is still a serviceable, middle six guy. They have a lot of talent over there. Jason Robertson, right? One of the highest scorers in the league this year. So Dallas has a lot of talent. If they were fully healthy, I would pick Dallas. I need to see how healthy they are, because if they're without Miro Heiskanen for any decent stretch of this series, I think it's a lot to ask of Dallas to beat this Minnesota team, because Minnesota's stacked. Minnesota is equally stacked as Dallas, in my opinion. It's close. But even without Miro Heiskanen, you still have a pretty good blue line with Thomas Harley and Esa Lindell, Ilya Lyubushkin. They brought in Tyler Myers at the deadline. But Heiskanen he's the engine that makes that blue line tick, though. So because of the health issues on Dallas's blue line right now and up front, I'm going to say Minnesota wins this one in 7 games. But if Dallas can be healthier, maybe I'd go Dallas. But because that's not the case right now, I'm going to go Minnesota in 7. So those are my picks. We have Boston, Tampa Bay, Carolina, Pittsburgh, and then we have Colorado, Vegas, Edmonton, and Minnesota. So I'm sure I'll be wrong more than I'm right. I look forward to these games, though. I can't wait. I love playoff hockey. We all love playoff hockey. And I just think that these playoffs are going to be so fun. I think that I don't really recall many postseasons in years past where there's been this many pick'ems, in my opinion. Usually you have a couple more heavy favorites, and I just don't see it right now. I don't think there's a single series in the Eastern Conference that's a lock for anybody. A single one. I think Boston, Buffalo is going to be an absolute grind fest. I think Montreal, Tampa is a pick'em. I think Philly, Pittsburgh, I think that's less of a pick'em. I do like Pittsburgh a little bit more than Philly, despite them having the same amount of points in the standings, all those underlying numbers I mentioned. But again, there are intangibles. Like Philly hasn't made the playoffs in a long time, and they're gonna be jacked up, right? So there's that energy and that youth and excitement for Philly. Carolina, Ottawa, I think is a pick'em. Out west, Colorado, LA, not a pick'em. I mean, that would be a colossal upset if Colorado lost that series. Anaheim, Edmonton, I could see Anaheim winning, but I wouldn't call it a pick'em. I just think that they have 2 of the best players in the world, and I just see them getting through the first round. Dallas, Minnesota, if both teams are healthy, it's a pick'em. I still think it's a pick'em as it currently stands. So, but because of the lack of health for Dallas right now, I'm going to say Minnesota. And then Vegas, Utah, that's a pick'em, I think. So it's going to be a really fun spring, and we will be here to cover it the whole way. Thank you all very much for listening. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy some playoff hockey, and I will talk to you soon.